Hi, I'm Anthony Vitti, and you're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com from Berklee College of Music.
For bass players only. Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today from the campus of Berklee College of Music in Boston with our good friend Anthony Vitti. What's happening, Anthony?
Sure, not too much. I'm just working today at Berklee teaching a regular 12-week program, and it's good to see you.
Well,
Good to drop by.
good to see you too. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Oh, no problem.
Let's talk about you.
Okay.
You are a hardcore East Coast guy, right? You're from Queens and New York and New Jersey and
right.
Boston and Maine and all that stuff. Tell me about living in all of those places. How were you first exposed to music? How would you describe your musical upbringing in terms of your family, brothers and sisters, parents, records playing, certain shows on the radio, going to concerts, things like that, or the school district? Jump in anywhere. How would you describe your musical upbringing?
My father was always playing music. He was always playing like a lot of Stan Getz, a lot of Frank Sinatra, stuff like that. Of course, we weren't allowed to touch the stereo as kids. You know that.
The hi-fi, right?
The hi-fi, yeah. Well, it was in that cabinet.
That's right. Yeah, we had one of those.
You couldn't touch that.
Yeah.
My oldest brother was an audiophile. He still has a room dedicated in his house, a whole basement with thousands of records, rare records, and he's very much into it. I had three older brothers, and they were all into music.
All boys in the
All
family?
boys. I'm the youngest of four boys. All wanted to be musicians, but none of them really did anything too much. My brother, who was a little older than me, played a little bass and guitar in bands in New York. He played in some bar bands in New York City. And for a minute in high school, I played in his band. I played bass. But my parents would never pay for lessons or anything like that. So I wanted to play cello when I was in sixth grade. And they said, well, when you can afford lessons, you can play. And, of course, I couldn't, so I was working. And when I went into high school, I was about 15, and my first real job at a garden center after school, the first paycheck, I got $300, and I bought a Rickenbacker 4001, a 76 Rick used. Mint, and because it was Geddy Lee, Chris Squire, Paul McCartney, everybody played a Rick. Yeah. And that was it. I got into the high school bands and immediately into all the good bands in Jersey, North Jersey, and then New York City, of course. The big bar bands at that time were like T.T. Quick, Twisted Sister, and I was playing with all those shows with all those bands. And,
Dee Snider?
Dee Snider, met him many times.
I hung out with Dee.
Shared the stage with those guys at the Soap Factory in Emmett's Inn in Jersey. So I was all part of that scene, the Good Rats, all those bands I was in. It was heavy metal. It was that, arena rock. I had the long hair and the look and 3 SVTs and 515s behind me and that Rickenbacker. So I was in that scene.
And your hearing still seems to be intact.
Great.
Well, backing up, what attracted you specifically to the bass?
I can always trace that back to sitting with my friends in high school listening to music. And I know I always heard it different from them. They were always listening to the guitar solos and, listen to that and listen to this, this guitar player and the melody and this and that. And I was just like, man, listen to that groove. Listen to that drummer, that bass player back there. I remember the Eagles, One of These Nights. It always stuck with me, that groove. Yeah. And they didn't think much of it. And I'm like, man,
the intro.
Listen to that. Right. Yeah. It just always stuck with me. And then, hearing Paul McCartney and guys like Chris Squire, and they were like these lead bass players. They stood out in the bands, their bass lines did, just always attracted me. And then, of course, I knew that if I played bass, I'd immediately get into all those good bands that my friends were in because there were no bass players. Right. There just weren't any bass players.
Well, I can relate, and I think so can they.
I think so.
Well, so you graduated from high school, and then you came here, right? You came to Berklee?
I did. I came right up to Berklee out of high school. Wasn't even sure I was accepted when I came up. Parents dropped me off on the front of the 150 building and said, if you don't get in, give us a call in 2 weeks, find a place to stay. Wow. Basically, because the loans hadn't come in and I applied so late that I hadn't been approved for the loans yet or anything. There was no auditions back then, so you just kind of came up, and if you had the money, you could get in. But everything worked out, and got in, and it was a lot harder than I thought when I came in. You know, I almost left after my first semester because when I got up here, you were kind of a big cheese and a
Big fish in a small pond?
Exactly.
No,
Well,
small fish in a big.
well, in New York, in the rock bands and
Yeah,
stuff, you know, you were in the Night Owl and the Aquarium, all the magazines, and then I come up here and, the players were so good. I mean, it was unbelievable. And this was primarily a jazz school back then. You couldn't play funk or rock or anything like that. You weren't allowed. And I got really annihilated for having that Rickenbacker. I had to sell it immediately. I sold it for $125
Wow.
at Daddy's across the street.
Do you miss it?
I do. I wish I had it. Yeah, I do. I just wish I had it because it was my first bass. I really miss it. But I couldn't play it anymore because the jazz players were just, annihilating me for having that. You can't play jazz on that. That's what they tell me. So I had to sell it. And I sold it, and I got, it started went down to New York, got a few custom basses and things like that.
Okay. Well, I know you did a lot of the Atlantic City stuff and a lot of the shows, but you've been teaching here for over 2 decades now.
Yeah.
So
I was pretty young when I started.
what advice can you impart to the people that want to make a career as a musician in general, as a bass player in particular?
Bass player. I think the most important thing is the fundamental skills: great time, great feel, versatility, reading. Reading is really what got me all my work when I was young. I came into Berklee, and back then they had a rating system from 0s to 9s, and it was only 3 digits, and I had 0s when I came in. And I remember sitting in a lab here on one of my first days, and I remember a reading lab, and the teacher passed out. It was Whit Brown, actually, and he passed out some reading material. He walks out of the room, and all the kids look and go, I can't read, and I don't need to read to do what I want to do. And I'm like, I was embarrassed that I couldn't read. It wasn't hard, and I couldn't read it. And I just realized right from that day, honestly, that was something tangible that could separate me from all these other bass players, because you couldn't fake that. It wasn't a matter of this guy's a great player. This guy, you can either read this stuff or you couldn't read the stuff, and that was it. And I worked really hard from that day to be one of the better readers. And by my 4th, 5th semester, I had 7s. I mean, I was one of maybe 3 or 4 guys that had reading ratings.
That'll separate you from the guitar players too,
There
right?
you go. Right. Notorious, right?
Tell me about your equipment.
My equipment, I've run the whole gamut. I started, of course, when I was younger, I used to have the 8-space rack in the 80s with the
I remember.
compressor, the Alessis Quadriverb, the Exciter, all that stuff. Now, I still play the same Fender jazz bass pretty much. I have a couple of Sires that I'm enjoying right now too a lot. I've been using those too.
Yeah, I've been hearing more and more about that company, Marcus Miller and everything.
They're amazing. They offered to send me a couple of basses. I had offered to pay for one and buy one, and all I asked for is if I could get a custom color, which they don't do. And they were so nice. Mickey and the guys from the company said, no, we want to give you the bass. We want to give you a bass. And I'm like, well, you don't have to do
Mickey's
that.
number is...
Right. Well, I generally, I feel funny like that accepting things. I would rather pay for it because they're putting out a great product. I just wanted one, and Marcus is a super nice guy. Well, they talked to Marcus, I guess, and they said, we'll make it for you, and we'll try to get you the color you want and everything. So I didn't hear from him for a while. Long story short, they got it done. They contacted me a few months ago, and they sent me 2. They sent me an original 5.7 custom color, and then they sent me the brand new vintage jazz bass they're doing. And they changed the electronics a little bit and the feel, the weight, and that thing is smoking. I mean, I with all my jazz basses, I probably have 10 or 12 vintage jazz basses. This is, I hate to say it's right up there with some of my really expensive basses. I'm instantly comfortable with it. It feels like my '69 Jazz that I always play, the green one that everybody sees me play if they see me. and the sound is great, and I'm getting used to it. I mean, I've been using it quite a bit.
It's
so.
amazing that they've
It's
been
an
able
amazing
to make
instrument.
such a quality instrument so affordable.
It's
for
unbelievable.
people.
It really is. I mean, that bass. You know, if somebody told me they paid $1,500 for it, I'd say that was good bass. You know.
We were talking a little earlier. You also mentioned Hipshot as a company that you're very fond of.
Oh, love them. I tell the students all the time to get the Hipshots because I don't own a 5-string. I've never played 5-string, and it's just something I'm not comfortable with. I never liked the sound of a 5 because I play a lot of soul and R&B and slap, and to me, nothing sounds like a 4-string. But with that, you can't get the low notes, and today you do need a D. I think if I was a young player, I would probably have a 5-string today along with my 4s. But I don't. I am kind of old school that way. But I've always had the Hipshot. When they came out, when I first heard about them, which was in the mid-'80s probably, and I got my Fender, my Jazz, I put one on immediately. It was when I first heard about it, I dropped it on there, and it's still on there. I still use it all the time, and it's awesome. I mean, how can you go wrong? When you drop that 4-string down to D, the sound is tremendous. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
How about the future, Anthony? What else would you like to do? You've done a lot. You've got a most impressive career. How do you top that, or not necessarily top that, but is there anything that you've had on that list? You know, I've always wanted to, or someday I'm going to.
I've been so fortunate. I really have. Working here, and I never thought I'd be a teacher. I mean, that's the last thing I thought, I would be doing. Growing up and playing. Now I basically just do the shows I want to do at this point. It's not about having to work 7 nights a week like I did for years and years and years. Now I do a lot of focus on my teaching. I enjoy teaching. I wrote a few online courses which I enjoy teaching for Berklee, and it's mostly now just the gigs I want to do for the playing situations, and it's not about money or touring. I don't like traveling. I never did like traveling, and that was a problem for me. I don't like being on the road and stuff like that, but I did it for years and years. But I've stopped that pretty much. East Coast, I'll work pretty much from New York up to Maine, on the East Coast, and basically just do the shows, multi-act shows, a lot of soul, a lot of Temptations, whoever comes up and they come into the area. I play with those acts and stuff if they call me to do the shows.
Nice position to be in, but you have certainly paid your dues.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Last question, Anthony.
Sure.
What would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music.
Outside of music, I think I'd be successful at anything I did. I'm a hard-working guy, and I really think that no matter what I did, I'd probably be in the military, though. I think that's one regret I have, is not serving and not being in the military. And that would be it. I probably would have went that route.
Well, we admire your patriotism.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. On location at the Berklee College of Music in Boston with our good
Sir.
friend Anthony Vitti. I'm John Liebman. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.